welcome to the Christmas special edition of the Questionable Album Club, the podcast where five middle-class Englishmen discuss maligned albums and perhaps reappraise them or not. But and that's what we do. It's Christmas. Yeah, so what a Christmassy album we've got in store for you today. Today's album is Dog Eat Dog, the 1985 album by Joni Mitchell, her 12th studio album, and apparently the first album that she doesn't play guitar on. She was 41 when she recorded this, came out in October 1985 on the Geffen label. I suppose the thing to say about this is that, well, it's produced by her co-produced by her bass-playing husband, Larry Klein, also sort of infamously co-produced by Thomas Dolby, who was a sort of a British synth pioneer of the 80s, and apparently they had a very fractious relationship during the making of this record. I guess two worlds colliding. And it's notorious, I suppose, because it's Joni Mitchell does that. It's Joni Mitchell, but with that big, unmistakable 80s sound. And we'll come to, let's just introduce the panel. So on the panel today, we've got Marcus Kingwell. Hello, Marcus.
Hello, Seb. Hello, everybody.
We've got Steve Gibson.
Good evening.
We've got Ross again. Thank you, Ross.
Evening, gents.
And we've got Steve Hackett joining us again for the second time. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks for having me back.
I've done that in wrong order. I was supposed to go Steve, then Ross. Ross, it was you who chose this. Could you explain why?
Yeah. As you probably all know, I'm a big Joni Mitchell fan. One of the one thing that Spotify Wrapped told me earlier this month was that, well, actually, the one thing it told me was I'm married to someone who's mad on Taylor Swift and uses my Spotify account. But if I get the Swiftie stuff out of the way, it tells me that when I'm on the move, by far and away, my most listened to artist is Joni Mitchell. She's my go-to when I don't know what to put on. But I've never listened to this album, and it's mostly because of its reputation as the sort of like the low point in her catalogue. But that's unusual for me because normally I'm not put off by that sort of thing. I have no time for the wisdom of the crowd. You know, I don't mind liking unpopular things. You know, I think the idea of credibility in music is bollocks, frankly. So it's unusual for me to avoid it, but I think it's because it sits chronologically between the two albums, which I would rank as my least favourite Joni Mitchell's. So I've sort of put it, in my mind, I put it into this sort of like mid 80s period, which is just not for me. And so never really got around to doing so. So I thought it just sounded questionable album club material, and really intrigued to know what people thought. Do you want my headlines, Seb, or do you want to go around?
No. That was good. That was perfect, I think. Let's go to Steve. Hackett. Steve, yeah. Again. Steve, to give us a bit of are you a Joni Mitchell fan? And what were your first thoughts on this record?
I am a fan, yeah. You know, the late mid-70s stuff. I'm not a fan of the folky stuff particularly. I've never heard a note of her 80s stuff until last night when I started listening to this. So I've only listened to it about 3 times, you know. I don't know any of the albums around it, anything like that. None of the tunes at all. So it's a brand new thing to me. But yeah, I love her work. It's, you know, for me, it's that trilogy, you know, in the mid-70s, I guess it was. Or was it Hijira, Hissing of Summer Lawns, and what's the other one? I can never remember the name of someone's reckless daughter or whatever.
Bon Juan.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they're the 3 big ones, aren't they? You know, I can't say really. I don't think she did anything put a foot wrong in the 70s. I love that stuff. But I've heard nothing since then. Absolutely nothing. So this is completely new to me. Very interesting. And yeah, quite like it.
Everyone's sort of circling around the rim. Marcus, give us a bit of rimming, Marcus.
I'll happily.
And then let's give a little bit of inside.
Go around the edge and then dip into the middle. Yeah, I don't know Joni so well, to be honest. I've listened to Blue many times, and for some reason I've sort of stuck with that as my like a lovely little warm, cozy album, peaceful, calming. Really thoroughly enjoyed it, but it's only quite a recent discovery, probably 18 months ago or something, and one of those things where I thought, why haven't I been listening to this earlier in my life? Because I just think it's wonderful. For one reason or another, have not got around to exploring other bits of her music. So initially I would say I really like Joni Mitchell. And the reputation around her is that she's almost a sort of goddess, isn't she? She's like way up there in terms of, despite what Ross said, artistic credibility being bollocks, she has massive artistic credibility. Critics love her, the punters love her. She transcends time and genres and fan bases, and you just think, wonderful.
I suppose, Marcus, what I think what Ross was alluding to was like she had a bad 80s, like Dylan with Empire Burlesque and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. Dylan had a famously terrible, lost his way massively in the 80s, and that stuff has never really been properly reappraised because it is pretty. You know, even in his book Chronicles, he says like I was lost, and then he found it again big time with Time Out of Mind. But I guess Ross is saying that obviously she is a major artist and she's a hugely famous. In a way, she's almost like the kind of female Dylan, isn't she?
Yeah,
but this is a, you know, like what Ross was saying, is the two albums that either side of this he didn't like. So is this like a does this do that, or does this do that?
Well, for me, definitely does that. Okay. Bloody awful.
That's you entering the crater. That's you coming down off the rim.
Yeah, really dire. But I don't want, in a way today, I want to see if we can get into some other questions about this. I mean, no, we're going to do the usual thing of like, dislike. And I thought musically it's just awful. It does absolutely zero for me. But there's some other things I want to sort of explore, like why do certain sounds and production styles do they dominate dozens and dozens of artists in a given point of time? I suppose it's partly a thing of fashion and of taste, but this has all the tropes and elements and cliches of mid-80s rock. I mean, exceptionally well executed, I have to say, but it's all there on this and dozens of scores of other records of that time, and the public loves that sort of stuff. And then it evolves and it moves on, and now it sounds massively dated. So I'll be interested in people's views on that, kind of why whole tonal styles of records kind of exist for a block of time and then fizzle out. There's a couple of things that sort of tickle my fancy, I suppose. One was an overall feeling that it reminded me of Dance Hall Days by Wang Chung. Washed over me, general sound. And Good Friends, the opening track, reminds me of The Big Money by Rush, when they were in that kind of phase, which actually was, I looked it up, as also 1985. So maybe they were in adjacent studios at the time, but there's lots of parallels there. Incidentally, I didn't like Rush's mid-80s stuff either. We won't go into favorite songs. I've really got very little to say that's complimentary about the whole thing, apart from it's very, very well executed, very well played, beautiful production. But I was annoyed that for someone who's a fabulous lyricist, I felt the vocal delivery was mumbling, and I couldn't hear her voice was low in the mix. And the big question for me is why she felt she had to do it, an artist of her caliber, why she felt she needed to fall into step with the sounds of the times rather than doing her own stuff and evolving in her own way. So I'll leave it there really for first impressions. I don't want to get sort of overly negative and slag off every single track. I just think that's going to be a bit pointless, but that's just my
Marcus, I think you've raised some points that I think we'll obviously come back to. That 80s sound is obviously something that we all have an opinion on, having lived through that period, and having lived through that sound, and how we felt about it at the time, and how we feel about it now with almost half a century distance from it. Do you know what I mean? And how it makes us feel, how you respond to it. Because my emotional response to this, I had several responses consecutively, and which I'll go into. So, but that was I completely agree with your point. Well, I don't agree with you, but anyway, Gibson.
Love Joni Mitchell. Loved the first two albums, then the three that the other Steve mentioned. We found out. I think Mingus is one of the most innovative things I've ever heard from a massively popular mainstreamish artist. She's one of those. I've been quite happy with what I've got from her. Because normally, if I love an artist, I'll have to go and watch loads of interviews and read some books and stuff. But I've never done that. I think I'm just happy with what she does, and I'm just happy with that. I agree. I was going to pretty much say it's interesting that if you listen to Mingus, which is just for me quite mind blowing for the time, everything is so innovative. Why? What was the pressure on these people in the 80s to your Dylans and to come out with this sort of stuff? I don't really understand. I looked into a bit of the Thomas Dolby thing, and what they were fighting over and whatever, and it all kind of, I'll speak more about that when we actually talk about the album. But yeah, I mean, it's just yeah, it's just a bit of a quandary really, why these people feel that, because they got, I mean, Neil Young, everyone, they all had a, were they that scared after producing so much they'd run out of steam? I don't know. It's an interesting point, but no. So it's been a lovely couple of weeks where I've of course been re-listening to Mingus and those three, I retire all the albums I love, and then I thought, oh shit, I better stick this one on then for the last few days, and yeah, more about that when we go around again, I guess, you know. But there's a couple of big revelations on this album for me that I'm still reeling from. And in fact, there's a third one now because Marcus is comparing Big Money to a song here, which is just utter nonsense. But on we move on.
I think I think it's that 80s sound. We were still in a modernist period in music. And I think people were still pushing on from the sonic developments from the 70s, and there were sequencers and samplers and synthesizers and gated drums and drum machines and all these things suddenly happening. And it was new, and it was like music was still moving forward. And I think these artists were still trying to stay credible as they moved into their 40s. And it was like, you know, they had a decision to make. Do we carry on playing Mr. Tambourine Man, or do we carry on in those tropes? But you know, these artists had moved forward at incredible velocity.
Sorry, Seb. There's a huge question of taste here. There's a huge question of when they moved on previous points in their career, they did it with tremendous taste. This album is, you said you couldn't hear a voice, Marcus. It's because there's a sample every 2 seconds. I thought there was building work going on or something at some point. You know, it's just it's tasteless. It's tastelessly done. I don't understand that. You know,
I think that's Thomas Dolby. I think Thomas Dolby.
There's
quite a lot of pan sound effects that are percussive and whatever. And
apparently he said in his book that he looking back on this, that he was like a kid in a toy shop. He just couldn't get enough of it, and that's what they fell out about. And it just shows. It's just the technology moved on. I understand people investing in it, but to lose all your musical taste is unforgivable, really.
Ross, I'm very aware that you chose this. You queued yourself up, and I swiped away from you. I'm just going to very, very quickly give my.
Sorry, I'll never do that. But
I didn't want to
lose that point because
that's good.
You know, it's
man. So me personally, when I listened to the first time, all I could hear was the production. And I just thought, oh god, it was. I found it unbelievably tiresome and just like a kind of, oh god, here we go. Oh, and it all sounds like that. The second time I could hear some songs, and then the third time I heard, I just loved it. I was like, I didn't even hear the production. And I think that's how they were. It was like, these are songs. They wrote the songs and they built them around this sound. At the time, it was very innovative and new. And so and then fourth time, fifth time, I don't hear the production. To me is a kind of cute little side thing. I don't hear it. I just hear. I loved it. I ended up. It's weird. It's a bit like the Alice Cooper. First time I heard it, I thought this is risible and shit, and then slowly, and you know, it became something I really loved it. And I still do. I think lyrically it's fantastic. I think her voice is brilliant. I think it's very brave. I think it's funny. I think some of the subject matter, 80s evangelism, all the Ethiopia, all those kind of 80s things are interestingly touched upon. But anyway, that's me. Ross.
I'm really pleased to hear that, because I haven't got there.
That's me.
And I want to. I mean, I did dislike it less the more I listened to it, and I've listened to it about a dozen times, I think now. And I was trying to really hear that a sort of maybe an endearing madness in there. I think it deserves its reputation, to be honest. I think that, you know, the why people love Joni is because she's a fantastic musician, writes these really affecting songs, has a really deft touch lyrically, and has a voice like no one has a voice like Joni, and I just don't hear any of that in this. And I think, you know, to a certain extent, you know, she's an artist who always moves forward, you know, and goes, even in the folk period, each album is a progression, and then she moves into her jazz influence, you know, period. And any artist who does that, there is going to be a moment where they're going to leave you behind for a while, and that's fine, you know. And you know, I think maybe this is my period. I pick her up later in a couple of albums, and it's fine. But with all the other 80s stuff going on, like the albums either side, Wild Things Run Fast and Chalk Mark in a Rainstorm, and even with the other stuff that's been mentioned before today and tonight, like Empire Burlesque, I can hear the songs underneath. They're struggling for air a bit, but I can hear Joni or Dylan within that. I can't really hear this. It sounds confused. It sounds like there are 4 producers on it, which, you know, which there are. It sounds like people are pulling in different directions. And lyrically, I think it's her poorest lyrical album. I think to an extent, when Joni Mitchell has got such a personal approach to lyrics, in that there's no filter, that sometimes it's almost uncomfortably raw what she puts on. And I think when you're writing about yourself, you're so close to that, you can really sort of paint with a fine brush and have nuance. I think when you're trying to take on militarism and capitalism and African famine and the fact the cigarette machine is empty, bizarrely, and all of these things in an album, I think just inevitably you end up, you lose the fine tip brush, you get the big paint roller out, and you're using terms like big wig financiers and the fiction of the boob tube. And I thought that was the most disappointing thing to me, that I couldn't even hold on to some of that stuff. So I'm afraid it sort of lived up to what I feared. I mean, I do wonder in terms of the production that people are talking on, and I don't want to suggest at all that anybody who deserves credit other than Joni Mitchell for her work, but I do wonder about the absence of Henry Louis on this for the first time since her first album. Because he was more than an engineer to her. He was a friend and a sounding board. And he's gone, and in comes Thomas Dolby and Klein. And I wonder if that change in collaborator allowed the handbrake to come off, and it's sort of the album to roll down the hill into the hedge somewhat. So I've been really trying to listen to it and get where you have, Seb, and I'm glad that you did, because maybe I'm a few weeks off that.
I think, Ross, I honestly think it could give it a couple of weeks, you'll come back and you'll hear the songs. Mm-hmm. I know exactly what you mean, and I think a lot of the "I love my Porsche," all that sort of stuff is just horrific, and there's a lot, and the empty cigarette thing is clever, but it just doesn't work, because it's just like it's an empty cigarette machine. It's like, is this really what she's singing about? This kind of clever percussive thing? Try another one, whatever it is. But I'm not saying it's perfect, but anyways, Steve Hackett, you hinted at quite liking it.
Yeah, got to take issue with Marcus there, because Dancehall Days is a banger, mate. It's an absolute classic.
Hey, I wasn't knocking it. I just said it reminded me of it.
So, I mean, the fact I agree totally with you, Seb. You're listening to it the first time, and all you hear is a Fairlight synthesizer. So I think basically anyone who could afford one then, and she obviously bought one. So as soon as you hear it, you think you're in sort of Hounds of Love territory, aren't you? It's the same sort of thing. But maybe not used as imaginatively as that. I don't know. So the production's overbearing when you first hear it. But I agree, I've only listened to it 4 times, and then all the things you like about Joni Mitchell tend to sort of come up through the cracks a little bit, But I also agree with Ross there. I think, lyrically, it's probably the worst thing that she's done. Ethiopia, which, funny enough, probably the most subdued of the tunes, the least overbearing production, and a good track, and I've been humming it all day, But Jesus Christ, it's patronizing, isn't it? It's just basically, she's seen the documentaries that we all saw at the time, and then she's just describing it. PJ Harvey tried to do that on an album, and she really fell flat, because it's just patronizing. It really is. And I think the single, was a single, wasn't it? Shiny Toys.
That was the second single. The first single was Good Friends, was the first single. There was Shiny Things.
Yeah, I love that. Is that the one with Michael McDonald?
Yeah, the first track one.
That's
wonderful.
So that track, Shiny Toys, is obviously written to be a hit single, and it just doesn't sound right. It's not a good tune at all. The rest of it, I actually am with you. I love it now. If this is the meant to be the worst of the 80s ones, then I'm ordering the others. So I think it's a good album. I really do. I'm not averse to that 80s production thing, and I know it blands things out. It's a sort of cocaine stuff, isn't it? But Thomas Dolby was better than most, I think, at that sort of thing. It could have been, it could have been some flash American guy. I don't know. But I agree with you entirely. You just hear it less and less, and then the things that you love about her come through, the vocal inflections. I love the fact she's getting a little bit angry about stuff, which I've never heard her do, even swearing, you know, at one point. And, you know, I don't know if it's something I'll be listening to forever, but I'm intrigued by it. I actually think it's a good album. I really do.
Steve, do you want to give us a bit more, Gibson? Oh no, hang on, it's not your turn. Sorry, Marcus. Do you want to?
Yeah, it's Marcus for me, isn't it?
Marcus.
Yeah, sure. Well, the back to the production sound, I never liked it back in the day, to be honest. The 80s, as you know, was one of my most intense musical periods as a teenager. And this sound was not of this music that I was listening to or liked. In fact, I hated this kind of sound in the 80s, and I'm still holding on to that dislike. It remains in my taste as something a hater. Everything about it has a familiarity and it's lacking imagination. You know, the gated drums, the chorus on the guitar, the sound effects. So that I cannot see through, and repeated listening has not made that go into the background. My secondary point, I suppose, is the one that Ross made. I think Ross and Steve, I hadn't thought of the word patronizing around the lyrics, but that's a very good way of doing it. But the fine brush, broad brush thing is spot on. It's so coarse. It's so kind of heavy-handed in the subject matter. You know, the way that the shiny toys take on consumerism. I thought it was funny. It works better as a joke song. The one I did sort of quite like, which everyone else seems to dislike, was the empty cigarette machine thing. Because I like the percussive sound, and I'm thinking there must be a higher meaning to this. This must be a metaphor of some description, whatever it is. So that kept me wondering, rather than there's starving kids in Ethiopia or some shaven-headed guys driving a new Porsche. So yeah, there's nowhere to go for me with this album anymore, apart from it's been a curiosity, and this is what this podcast is all about.
Marcus,
So,
honestly, I know I'm repeating myself here. I think it'd be really interesting, just because the 80s production is it's so hard not to hear it. And like Marcus, I'm like you. I think Steve probably the same. We grew up metal kids, right?
Yeah.
And when you grow up in the 80s as a metal kid, right, you watch Top of the Pops and you're waiting. You have to sit to all this fucking shit. All these songs of this production, like Thompson Twins and everything else, with standing on the stage with their hexagonal drums hitting it once, dressed in a fucking tutu or whatever, and you waiting for Iron Maiden to come on and do Running Through, and you go yes, and do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this was something we were forced to consume in the 80s. So we all have a kind of emotional response as well as a kind of, you know what I mean? It's a sort of it's a sort of fucking hell. But I made my peace with it. You know what I mean? When I sort of I don't want to say grew out of metal, but when I discovered other music and stuff, I came back round to it. There's loads of I've actually got lists. I've talk about this again, I think, a little bit later, but I kind of made a list of, I was thinking about this production. Does this necessarily make an album bad, this sort of production? And I made a list of other 80s, big 80s sounding albums that I really love that have got this sort of production. And so can everyone think about that as a sort of ongoing thing while we go through this, right? While people talk, can anyone think of any albums that have that particular 80s, big 80s sound that they love? That's a kind of, I should have said that at the beginning, shouldn't I, perhaps?
Well, I suppose this is part of my thing. I find it jars with the songwriting, and
it doesn't necessarily.
Well, it's just where I'm coming from. Like if this was, the production, if it was an album for Cher, or it was for, who's the other I had in mind? I mean, she could have gone down if she wanted to become contemporary, use the synths and all that sort of thing. You think of the way that the Fairlight was used for Kate Bush or Peter Gabriel, where you've got music which subsequently stands the test of time, and we know it's from the 80s, but it doesn't feel like 80s music. It's got a longevity to it. The sound hasn't anchored it in those particular years, whereas this sound has. It's nailed it right there between, well, I thought this was 83, but I found out it's 85. But there we go, that very much mid-80s period. I think that's, of course, you don't know that at the time as a record producer, as a musician, whether that's really going to nail you down to that particular short span of years. But I think that's the legacy they've got with this sound.
Can I make a point? You're a lot of musicians, aren't you? Most of you. You play in, yeah. So if someone had said to you, well, here's X number of pounds, you know, and the latest thing is this Fairlight synthesizer that you can sample jazz players, you can sample the drummer, you'd be interested, wouldn't you? You'd want to do it and fart around with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if someone was bankrolling it, you know.
But it's not just the Fairlight, Steve. It's actually it's everything else. It's all the human played instruments. I mean, the bass playing on this is fantastic, but it's exactly of that style of mid-80s. You know, this guy, whoever it is her husband, could have played probably all sorts of different styles, but everything is right in that particular very, very narrow track. It hasn't gone out, which the people of this caliber could have done. They could have put all their geniuses together and come out with something which was much more different around the songs which are underneath it all.
It is, but there is uniformity to this modernistic production, which is, you know, the bass is all high octaves, chorus, heavy chorus, the guitar is all like, you know, DI'd, highly processed, the drums are all gated. It's like it's everything, isn't it?
It's the whole thing, yeah. It's way beyond the Fairlight.
Steve Gibson, what are your so we'll come back to this. Well, I think this is the most interesting conversation all about this. Funny enough, Steve Gibson, what are your thoughts on this big 80s production as a Rush fan? Because early 80s Rush, mid 80s Rush does sound like this.
Well, that's how long have we got? We can't go down that road today. I think she's been, the Joniness has been sort of produced out of the songs. I heard there's a piano version of Dog Eat Dog, which is completely beautiful and sublime on YouTube. Go and listen to it. It's proper like old Joni, and it's when think about Joni Mitchell. Thinking about, I was listening to a fair bit of her the last couple of weeks. She has the ability with me to sing one line, and I'm on a journey. Just one line. That's all she has to do. But it's all lost on this album, and there's some good songs there, but I suppose a couple of them are just sort of budding through for me rather than, because I can't get beyond the production and the drumming. The drumming was really, really, the sound of the drums and the actual playing was really annoying me. And I looked up who it was, and to my shock horror, it's Vinnie Colaiuta who plays on this, who's anyone who plays the drums is probably, you cannot deny, is one of the greatest ever living drummers, or the greatest drummers ever probably. And I've never heard an album that him on it that I don't like until now. And Alex Acuna's on there, who's probably the best percussionist, who I've never heard an album I don't like that he's on until now. So that was quite shocking. So I wonder, and Marcus just said there, you know, with these geniuses, when they got together, they could have done better. And then they'd be world peace, Marcus. This is what happens when, you know, people like that with egos in the music business get together, and then Thomas Dolby comes in with a new toy, you know, and then they all fall out and it sounds like dog shit. That's exactly what happens. And that's what this is, sadly. I think there's some good, it's interesting because there are kind of songs there that are budding through for me. But overall, it's just produced out of it. I made some notes about the last, funnily enough, when Ethiopia and Impossible Dreamer came on, they weren't as lyrically, because it's the worst album I've heard from her by a long way.
I think we all agree with that, actually. I think that's one thing we all agree with.
But because the production's dialed back on those songs, I found them a much easier listen. You know, some of the songs with the samples and the kind of, they're not backing vocals, are they? They're just some bloke in a deep voice. It was verging on the comical, really. It's so over-egged. I can't, but I'm shocked at the lack of taste and at the fact Vinnie Colaiuta's on that, and there was nothing about the drumming I could sort of warm to. So it's been, it's quite a.
There's no warmth. There's no warmth in this 80s production. That's the whole thing about it. It's shiny.
No, exactly.
And
so
non-analog, digital.
As I'm speaking, I'm trying to think of other albums. I mean, the problem with your point about albums with a big 80s production is that I probably haven't listened to them for ages, so I don't know how big the production is. Infidel sprung to mind because I remember the drum sound on that.
It doesn't sound 80s. It just doesn't. That sounds late 70s. It never quite crosses into.
Maybe the drum sounds very 80s in Infidels, isn't it? As I remember, Sly and Robbie and all that. I've not heard it for a long time, so I don't know. You know, listening to it
sound like this.
No, but it's difficult to think of a more over-egged 80s album than this. Which is and if you just said Joni Mitchell had done it, would be responsible for it, I'd have been quite shocked. You know, but
Well, Steve, Hackett, you mentioned Hounds of Love. That's a hugely critically acclaimed album that sounds very much like this. It uses these sonic ingredients to create something which transcends. I don't like it. I'm not a fan, but
No, I know, but the machine, whatever it does, that thing, I'm not exactly sure what a Fairlight does. So if you're drumming, you do it, and then you sample it, do you? And then you play that in the background, and that becomes the drum track.
Does anybody actually know what a Fairlight does? I know what it sounds like. I don't know how it works.
They were really, really expensive, weren't they?
It's one of the first samples,
Yeah.
wasn't it, I believe.
Trevor Horn bought one, didn't he?
60 grand then, weren't they, or something?
Yeah, I think it might be even more, Steve.
Yeah. So I'm just
actually interesting. Trevor Horn is somebody who used this sound, but used it. I think super well. If you listen to Relax, Two Tribes, all that stuff, it sounds absolutely fantastic. It still sounds good. Do you know what I mean?
I agree.
But then he's got probably a bit more talent and taste than.
Yeah,
maybe we've been on quite so much cocaine.
I think also. I think, is there not an element of this? If you listen to, like, I'm holding my hand. If you listen to early Duran Duran, Rio, right? You can tell that they're creating this music through this. This is them. This is them. This technology is them. This white heater, that technology is what, and that's what Trevor Horn was doing. So if you're creating like this, the white hot heat of this, then there's something kind of creatively, artistically valid about it. I suppose what Marcus was saying, there's a little bit of a kind of an auteur chasing a sonic ambulance with this. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. That's exactly it, Seb. It's like, what's the latest thing? I mean, it's a very good fit for Questionable Album Club. You think back, it's like when we listened to the Queen album a few months ago. Was it The Game?
No, it was Hot
Space. It's trying to fit in with the zeitgeist when your musical heritage and inspirations are significantly older, and it's an attempt at modernizing, and it just doesn't work. It might work for some people sometimes, but in this instance, I don't think it's working. It certainly didn't work with Queen, and there's numerous other people where they try and update their sound.
Maybe, I mean, to be fair, we're thinking about it, maybe the world at that point did not want a folk album or a sort of jazz album,
Yeah, I agree. Exactly.
Yeah. But is it about what the world wants? If you're an artist, success,
I'm assuming even Joni Mitchell and Bob Dylan have commercial pressures at that point.
They have a record label. The record label says, Can you offer? There are so many examples of record labels rejecting albums by major artists, saying no, there's no single and there's fuck off back in there, and that's how Paranoid came about. That's how Smells Like Teen Spirit came about. They were turned down, so go back and record something else.
And we are in new territory here, where an artist who had their first album in 67 or 68 is still going. I mean, that doesn't happen. I mean, and I think. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, because if you listen to the albums before and after, and I say the albums I generally avoid a bit, so I might be getting this wrong, but from my memory, the 80s, that sort of sound, particularly that drum sound, is present in all three. But there's almost like this curve, so it's of lighter touch in the first and second one. So you get very much like the boom drum, but you don't get all the other stuff, and it's almost like, so it's not like this is a one-off. It's almost segued into, and. It's odd because I went to go and see Thomas Dolby play about 2 months ago, and he was supported by the Macaloon, who's not Paddy, from Prefab Sprout, and in the Dolby set he played a bunch of songs which he was involved in production and playing on as well, and it just sort of reminded you that just the presence of Thomas Dolby didn't necessarily drag everything down into here. I think the Prefab Sprout Steve McQueen, for instance, and I just looked up and I didn't know he played on Def Leppard's Pyromania.
Did he?
Yeah, apparently so, under the alias Booker T. Boffin.
Mind you, that's got quite a big 80s sound, to be honest, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true.
So it's not, I don't think the sum of its parts explains the decision making that's there. It's almost like that, having moved from one thing next, she's like doubling down on this. It's like this is where we are. So it's but the fact that it fell out over this album, and the fact that there's a fourth producer on it, suggests that there was a certain lack of control going on. And interesting, actually, the Trevor Horn reference you made. I think that's when you were asking about those sort of 80s produced albums. Well, I think, you know, my favorite is probably, you know, ABC's Lexicon of Love.
Yeah.
Which has got all the technology, but it has a really light touch. It's a big sound, but it's light. And the same with Welcome to the Pleasure Dome, which I also quite like as an album, although there's lots of filler on it. So, you know, I think there's more going on here than just the 80s production.
Yeah, I agree with both those albums. I've also got a lot of 80s Cure sounded like this, which I love. Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me. It sounds very 80s splashy. Cupid and Psyche 85, Squitty Plitty sounds like it. It's fantastic. Even The Colour of Spring, Talk Talk, you know, where they started to go, you know, the one before Spirit of Eden, Laughing Stock, that sounds very 80s, and that's a sort of like visionary masterpiece. Well, towards their vision. You know, 80s Fleetwood Mac sounded really good. Mirage, Tango in the Night.
I think, you know, they've been doing these anthology things, you know, of her, where they take a period 5 years, you know, and they usually release all the extraneous stuff, all the live sets and demos and things like that. It'd be very interesting to hear if they're going to do that in the 80s ones, you know, so that maybe you'll hear a lot of those things that Steve was talking about, like that brilliant, it really is brilliant piano version of Dog Eat Dog, you know. It'd be very interesting to hear that, because there'll be none of the production on it, you know, if they take those 80s albums and release the demos. I'm sure they're around, you know.
I wonder how much of this is it just becomes too easy in the mid 80s, that if you were trying to do stuff in the late 60s on 4 tracks or even on 8 tracks, you had to have some sort of creative nous there to do all this stuff. And by the time you get 85, as long as you've got somebody who knows which buttons to push, you know, it just becomes far too easy to do. And maybe this is where technology sort of, you know, butts its head up against creativity.
I think we're also slightly, perhaps somewhat naively, forgetting the role of the producer, of course, because the producer, all these albums had a producer who made everything, who called it all together, who had their own sonic vision, their own sonic input and everything, and they really ran all that. Do you know what I mean? And so I think the producer, of course, who is often nominated by the record company, and in the 80s, I guess it's just sort of, well, that's you know, you get the producer you think is the big thing, and that, you know, that artist, and you know, these decisions made at boardroom level, aren't they? Do you know what I mean?
It's like these days that, you know, the first thing they do in the studio is ask where the auto tune button is. You know, I mean, there's. Yeah.
Thank God.
As well, I mean, you know, maybe she just ran out of things to write about. You know, it's, you know.
I think lyrically, subject-wise, the lyrics are banal, but I think she does. I mean, the lyric, what I've got, you know, that song. I love there's a song called "3 Great Stimulants." What a brilliant. Yeah. That's kind of radical, right? And the song, it's just like lyrically, it's fantastic. It's brilliant. There are definite low points lyrically on this, but I think it's not all terrible. I think some of the songs are absolutely fantastic, and I think it's very up and downy.
Seb, can you go a bit deeper on what you love? I know you've talked about you can filter out the production on after your 4th listen. But give us, I'd like to just get a bit more into the songs that have really wooed you, that really seduced you, and if you can say why, over and above a purely emotional response.
I genuinely think it's one of those albums like Loaded by Velvet Underground. It's got an absolute killer 1, 2, 3. I think Good Friends, Fiction, and 3 Great Stimulants are just absolutely, they're all, because I've listened to it 5 or 6 times over the last week. I'm kind of I don't know. I just listen. I hear an album. I think the point tax free. I don't know. It's difficult to explain. I mean, I could go through track by track, but I think that would be boring. I hear songs. I think I like this song, and I don't hear. I filtered out that sound. I hear the song. I hear they've all got bass lines, keyboard parts.
Yeah.
You know, they're all really interesting sonically. There's no kind of. It's not just A, C, G. It's, you know, they're all nicely struck. It's like I think it gets. I think the first side A is like better than side B. I don't particularly like Shiny Toys Ethiopia, but I think Impossible Dreamer sounds like John Martin. Lucky Girl's really good. Fiction sounds like Fleetwood Mac, which I like. I really like it.
It's a good old fashioned emotional response. You just
absolutely.
It doesn't need analysis. It just is. You just like it. It just turns you on. That's it.
Yeah, I mean,
fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose to some, right, that big 80s production is a deal breaker. Simple as that, right? It's like I can't. All I can hear is this.
Yeah.
That's what the first time I heard it, I thought, oh God, I didn't want to even get to the end. I genuinely disliked it. I thought, I can't bear it. I can't hit it. I've heard this so million times before. It's so unimaginative and so banal. But then, because it's because this is this weird thing about what we do, right? You hear this record that you think, oh, it's shit. I would never in normal life, in civilian life, you don't put that on again. You wouldn't even get to the end of the first song. But because we do this, we have to come here and talk about this. Listen to it a second time, listen to it a third time, and you find just very rarely, only a couple of times, Drama by Yes and Alice Cooper, Dada were the ones where slowly repeated listening finally rewards you. Because the way we all listen to music now, everything is just on off. All history of music is literally just there immediately, which makes you you don't spend time with music anymore. I mean, we listen to a lot of music, but we don't spend time with it like this. So for me, something like this, Joni Mitchell, who I don't love Joni Mitchell like Gibson, probably like Hackett and Ross. I like her a lot. I admire her perhaps more than I love her. She's never quite pierced my heart. But this is the closest she's come to piercing my heart because I've repeatedly listened to it. And I've managed to filter out all the shiny toys bullshit. And I could just focus on the songs that really genuinely move me, like Good Friends, Fiction, three great stimulants, and a few other ones. I'm talking too much. Someone else say something before we give it a mark.
Good Friends is a brilliant track.
I love it. Can I just say the video? Look up the video for Good Friends. It's really good. It's really clever.
I love Michael McDonald as well, I love that. I love his vocals. But, it depends when you get into it, doesn't it? What time of your life you get into it. And the first thing I ever heard was a late night radio broadcast of the Shadows and Light thing, which was about 1980. And then, of course, you go back, don't you? And then there's all this wonderful stuff in the 70s. And then you think, right, okay, I'm full now. I've got my Joni Mitchell fill, but there's... I don't know what else she released. Did she write stuff? Did she release stuff in the 90s and the noughties or anything? Or
yeah. I mean, the album 2 on from this, which is Night Ride Night. Night Ride Home, is where she's coming out of that 80s production. There's still a bit of that drum sound in there, but she's back to writing these just absolutely beautiful songs. Then the album after that is the one where she's dressed up like Van Gogh in the cover, which his name escapes me, and then then she gets ill, essentially. So they tail off. And the shame is that last time she toured the UK, I think, was about 82, 83. So never got a chance to see her. But you're right. I mean, I came across Joni when I was just finishing sixth form, and I had some friends who were doing teacher training college at King Alfred's, and so they were 2 or 3 years older than me, and so in those days when you're 17 and they're 20, they're where it's at. And I spent a lot of time hanging around their house, and the 2 albums they sort of gave me was Joni Mitchell's Blue and Tom Waits' Heart of Saturday Night. And so to me it has that feeling of 2 o'clock in the morning sitting in someone's garage after coming home from the Mash Tun and listening to these albums. And I think you can't sometimes how an artist connects with you is involved in the time.
Oh yeah. What hasn't been mentioned about this album? Because I haven't, I only found out the other day, so I did a tiny little bit of reading. But apparently, she's married to one of the guys. Yes, at this time,
Larry Klein. Yeah.
Larry Klein, bass player.
And I'm just wondering if he had a massive part to play in this album.
He did. Apparently, he did. He co-wrote several songs.
He co-wrote.
Yeah, 2 of them. Yeah.
Oh right.
But that's why I sort of mentioned earlier the absence of Henry Louis. I wonder whether this sort of shift in main collaborators.
Right, it's time for scores, everybody. Oh, does anybody else? I asked a question. Ross, you answered a few. Can anyone else name any songs from the 80s that they love that has this big splashy 80s production?
Well, I don't love it, but it also reminded me of Time After Time by Cyndi Lauper.
Yeah, well, it's that kind of vibe, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right, let's do scores. Marcus, let's start with you.
26.
Very good. No summing up, just a score. I like that.
Can't be bothered.
Steve Hackett.
26. What's it out of?
100.
Oh, is it? 7.5.
7.5. Do you mean
Oh, no, 75, sorry.
Ross?
Yeah, it did stop irritating me as much as it did first listen, and I have to tear myself away from the fact it's Joni and do it as just an album. So I'm going to go for 30.
Thank you. Steve Gibson, and thank you for the summing up there, Ross. Good work. Gibson?
I could, yeah, I can't. I'm not going to listen. It's the worst Joni Mitchell I've heard. It's so difficult because, you know, when it's an artist that you like, but I won't listen to this again. What I will look forward to is hopefully I will definitely listen to a demos package because there's some really good songs in there. But we have to mark the album, so it's a 20 from me.
20.
Yeah,
I think that's a really good point about the demos,
yeah.
not release stuff. I'll definitely listen to Dog Eat Dog. For me, that sounds like a very good.
They might not release it because they've been doing all the Asylum years, and of course this is Geffen, so it's a different thing.
Oh, yeah.
Here, you know. But you know, you say, Steve, it's probably the worst Joni Mitchell record I've heard. But all things are relative, aren't they?
Yeah, it's still sort of all right, you know.
Yeah, it's great.
Right, I'm going to give it 77.
Oh, have you rigged that score, Seb? Because you've heard everybody else's and you're doing the averages.
No, I am adding them up on my fucking phone.
He's got. What's the point if you're going to lie on this? You're only lying to yourself.
Marcus, you think I would give honest? What a suggestion! Oh my
Controversy
God.
on the Festival Album Club.
I'm now going to have to start adding up again. So hang on. So Marcus 26.
Yeah.
Steve 75. Ross 30. Gibson 20. Me 77. I'm just going to start again, Marcus, because of that outrageous slur that I'm sort of somehow trying to fix is in. Plus 30.
Are the bets being taken on this or something?
20. Yeah, exactly. Betting markets are shifting. So that's 228 divided by 5. It gives us a mean total of 45.6. Where does that put it on the leaderboard? In seconds. So 45.6. That puts it at number 5. Okay, so number 1. I know I do this every time. Yeah. I'll just go over it. So number 1 is Thunderbox with 72.5. Number 2, Drama 61. Number 3, God's Hates Us All by Slayer, unbelievably 52. Number 4, Grinder Man 2, 50.6. This is now in at number 5, 45.6. Number 5, Tin Machine with 39, a big drop. And then we got Dada, Saved, Get Jack, Dan Reed, Rockstar, Calling All Stations by Genesis, and Burning Witches by Warlock. They'll bring up the rear. In fact, Joe, Genesis, Calling All Stations, even managed to stay ahead of Dorian Page. But anyway, Marcus, it's your turn for the next album. Would you like to reveal what your choice is?
To reveal my choice. I've been thinking about the common thread that runs through all of these, which is the change of direction for an artist, or sometimes what is rumored to be their low point. I don't know if this is rumored to be this particular person's low point, but it was certainly on the face of it a change of direction. An album I've not heard, but I'm intrigued. He has a very distinctive guitar style, and I think this might hopefully show a little bit of a change of direction. The album is called Blue Lightning. It's by Yngwie J. Malmsteen, who, for those that don't know, he's a Swedish heavy metal guitarist, virtuoso, plays extremely fast, rumored to be influenced by a lot of classical music, a lot of instrumentals. But this album, he does covers, including some classic rock stuff from the 60s, a few blues things. So I'm thinking maybe he's going to slow down a bit, do some nice kind of shuffly blues and hanging on one note and all that sort of thing. We shall see in January what everybody thinks of Blue Lightning by Yngwie J. Malmsteen.
Thank you, Marcus. A very interesting choice. Steve Hackett, you strike me as a big Yngwie fan.
A big what?
Yngwie, it's his fucking name, mate. Yngwie.
I've never heard of him.
Never heard of him. Oh, you like it? You like it? Ross, you an Yngwie fan?
Around the time I was subscribed to Guitarist magazine, he was big news, and I always thought his first name was Yigny. So no, don't think I've even ever heard of him. Sorry, I've ever heard him. You know?
So you've never heard his music? Wow.
I don't think so. I don't.
Oh, well, you're in for a treat here, mate. You're in for a treat here. Steve Gibson, Marcus, I don't think you know this, but me and Gibson know this album quite well.
Oh, okay.
Well, we'll talk about it. We'll talk
Yeah,
about it.
okay.
What's quite funny is we've got Simon Ward on the next pod, who I was talking on Saturday, and we were talking to him about coming on this. And he was like, "Make sure it's Simon friendly. Make sure it's Simon friendly." And this is the most.
Of course not. You get
this is the most Simon friendly album, which is so it's a good choice for that. Yeah,
Is he your bass player from Provs?
He is. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Good.
Oh, that's great. Well, a very interesting choice. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Ross, for as always, and for coming and joining.
In fact, Ross, that's the first guest choice, the first ever guest choice.
Yeah, it was a really good one as well, man. It was really good. It was really good.
Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. Really good to talk about that 80s stuff, that 80s sound, and that kind of emotional response to it. Thank you, Steve Hackett. You've been fantastic as always, mate. Always good fun.
Thanks for having me. Have a good Christmas.
Yeah, you too. Oh, yeah, it's on Christmas. Yeah, Christmas. Yeah, keep getting that. Yeah, for what it's worth. Marcus, thank you, and thank you for your suggestion. Steve Gibson, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, Tree, for reminding us all that it's Christmas. And
well, you know me.
Yeah. Any opportunity. Thanks, guys. And that's the end. Thank you. We'll see you on the next one.
Bye.
Bye-bye.